That cold, man, it just seeps right into your bones. It was like the outside air was mirroring how I felt inside, empty and biting. I didn't even have a real plan when I walked out. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house another second, surrounded by people who clearly didn't see me, didn't value me. So I just started walking. Didn't know where, didn't really care. My car was still parked in their driveway, but honestly, the thought of going back in for it felt like more effort than I could muster. The silence from inside the house was almost a physical weight lifting off me, a stark contrast to the constant undercurrent of judgment and expectation I usually felt within those walls. Each step I took away from that birthday party felt like a small act of rebellion, a tiny assertion of my own existence. I walked for what felt like miles, the cold seeping into my fingers and toes, but a strange sense of warmth beginning to bloom in my chest. It was the warmth of finally choosing myself, of prioritizing my own emotional well-being over the endless cycle of trying to please people who seemed determined to remain displeased. Eventually, I ended up at this 24-hour diner a few blocks away, the kind with the sticky tables and the smell of stale coffee hanging in the air. It wasn't exactly glamorous, but it was warm, and nobody knew my name. That anonymity felt like a blessing, a temporary escape from the suffocating familiarity of my family. I slid into a booth by the window, the worn vinyl cool against my skin, and ordered a coffee. Black, just like my mood. Outside, the snow had started to fall in earnest, fat, lazy flakes swirling in the streetlights. It was one of those moments where you feel completely alone in the world, even in a room full of strangers, yet somehow that solitude felt peaceful. For the first time in a long time, there were no expectations weighing down on me, no silent criticisms echoing in my ears. There was just the quiet hum of the diner, the clinking of mugs, and the steady rhythm of my own thoughts. I sat there for hours, nursing that one cup of coffee, just letting everything sink in. Ava's words so casually cruel, yet so reflective of the underlying sentiment of my family. My sister's dismissive smirk, my mother's silent approval, my father's callous chuckle. Each memory played out in my mind like a scene from a bad movie, a movie I had unknowingly been starring in for far too long. It hit me, with the force of a physical blow, how much energy I had wasted trying to earn their approval, trying to fit into this mold they had created for me. A mold that was never going to fit because it wasn't designed for me. I was always going to be the other one, the reliable fallback, the one whose needs and feelings were consistently secondary. The realization was both painful and strangely liberating. It was like finally acknowledging a truth I had subconsciously known for years, but had been too afraid to confront. The weight of that denial began to lift, replaced by a nascent sense of self-respect. That night, sitting in that greasy spoon diner, something shifted in me. The hurt was still there, a deep ache that had become a familiar companion. But underneath it, a spark of anger started to flicker, a righteous indignation at the years of being taken for granted. And with that anger came a sense of clarity, a resolute determination to change the narrative of my life. I was done. Done trying to prove my worth to people who were unwilling to see it. Done sacrificing my own happiness for a family that offered so little genuine warmth in return. Done being the invisible bank account, the silent supporter, the one who always showed up only to feel like I wasn't truly seen. That's when I made a decision, a quiet vow to myself that things were going to be different. A big one. The kind that would ripple through the carefully constructed facade of our family life and change everything, whether they realized it yet or not. The first step was severing the financial ties, the invisible threads that bound me to their constant demands. The next morning, after a few fitful hours in a cheap motel, I went to the bank. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I sat across from the bank teller, the words I was about to speak feeling both terrifying and empowering. I closed out my joint accounts with my mom, the ones I had diligently contributed to for years. the ones that had often been drained by their unexpected emergencies. I redirected my paychecks to a new account, one that bore only my name. It felt powerful, like I was finally taking control of my own life, my own resources. It was scary as hell, a leap into the unknown without the familiar safety net of my family's financial dependence. But beneath the fear, a sense of exhilaration began to bubble up. This was my life, my money, and I was finally the one in control of it. It was the first tangible step towards creating the boundaries I desperately needed, a declaration that I was no longer willing to be taken for granted. The immediate aftermath of my financial decoupling was quiet. For a few days, maybe even a week, there was an eerie silence. I almost started to wonder if they hadn't even noticed. Maybe the automatic payments had a delay, or perhaps they were just unusually self-sufficient for a brief period. It gave me a strange sense of anticipation, like waiting for a dormant volcano to finally erupt. I knew it wouldn't last. Their reliance on my financial contributions, however subtle or overt, had become an ingrained part of their lifestyle. It was only a matter of time before the cracks started to show. The first sign of the impending storm came in the form of a flurry of increasingly frantic text messages from Rachel. Initially, they were vague inquiries about why the cable wasn't working, followed by more pointed questions about the internet being down. Then came the accusations. Had I changed the password? Was I being petty? It was almost comical, their immediate concern for their entertainment, completely divorced from any concern for my well-being or whereabouts. My phone buzzed incessantly with her demands for explanations, each message laced with a growing sense of entitlement. It was as if my financial support was an inherent right, not a gesture of familial obligation that had been consistently met with indifference and disrespect. My mother's approach was, as always, more nuanced, more manipulative. Her voicemails were a carefully constructed tapestry of wounded martyrdom and thinly veiled guilt trips. She spoke of her increasing medical bills, her inability to manage household expenses, her profound disappointment in my uncharacteristic behavior. There was no direct acknowledgement of the hurtful words at Ava's party, no hint of understanding the pain I had been carrying for years. It was all about her hardship, her suffering, and my perceived betrayal of my filial duty. Her words were like carefully aimed darts, designed to pierce the armor of resolve I was slowly trying to build. For a moment, the old guilt pangs would resurface, that ingrained sense of responsibility for her well-being. But then I would replay Ava's cruel words, my father's dismissive laughter, and the memory would steel my resolve. Even my father, the quiet observer, eventually weighed in with a couple of gruff phone calls. He didn't engage in the emotional theatrics of my mother or the outright anger of Rachel. His approach was more pragmatic, appealing to my sense of reasonableness. He urged me to reconsider my actions, to think about the family, to not be so dramatic. There was no acknowledgement of the years of his own passive complicity, his quiet acceptance of the way I was treated. It was simply an expectation that I would fall back into my accustomed role as the family fixer, the one who silently absorbed their needs and smoothed over any financial bumps in the road. Through it all, I maintained my silence. I didn't answer their calls, didn't respond to their texts or voicemails. It wasn't out of malice, but out of a desperate need to create space, to allow myself the time and emotional distance to process everything. Their frantic attempts to re-establish contact only served to reinforce my decision. It was a stark illustration of the one-sided nature of our relationship. They reached out only when they needed something, their concern rarely extending beyond their own immediate needs. My silence was, in its own way, a powerful form of communication, a clear message that the old dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer available to be their emotional and financial crutch. During this period of self-imposed exile, I found unexpected comfort in the company of my friends. People who knew me outside the context of my family, who valued my company for who I was, not for what I could offer. Their unwavering support and genuine affection were a balm to the years of subtle emotional neglect I had endured. I rediscovered hobbies I had long abandoned, painting vibrant canvases that reflected the burgeoning sense of freedom within me, spending weekends hiking in the crisp autumn air, the solitude of nature offering a space for quiet contemplation and healing. It was like peeling back layers of a constricting garment, finally allowing myself to breathe freely. The world outside the suffocating confines of my family's expectations felt vast and full of possibilities. Then came the unexpected catalyst, the news about the house. My mother had spoken of this particular property for years, a charming little cottage nestled just outside of town with a sprawling sun-drenched garden. It was her dream house, a recurring subject in her wistful sighs and detailed descriptions in real estate magazines. Ironically, she often spoke of it as a sanctuary, a place where she could finally feel at peace, truly appreciated. The stark contrast between her idealized vision of this home and the often unappreciative way she treated her own daughter wasn't lost on me. The memory surfaced unexpectedly one quiet afternoon as I was idly scrolling through online listings, a form of mental escape during a particularly dull workday. And there it was, her dream house, for sale. The image on the screen, bathed in the golden light of a late afternoon sun, triggered a complex cascade of emotions within me. Sadness for her unfulfilled dream, a fleeting flicker of the old ingrained desire to make her happy, quickly overshadowed by a stronger, more assertive feeling, the resolute understanding that my resources were now mine to allocate as I saw fit. All right, neighbour, here's part 3 of Vivian's story, approximately 5,000 characters. The idea of Aunt Carol arrived almost fully formed, a quiet voice of clarity amidst the swirling emotions. She had always been the steadfast presence in our often turbulent family dynamic, a gentle soul who offered unwavering kindness and support without expectation or judgment. While my mother and Rachel were quick to offer criticism and pronouncements, Aunt Carol provided a safe harbour, a listening ear, and a consistent belief in my capabilities, even when I doubted them myself. She had navigated her own share of life's challenges with quiet strength and resilience, always prioritizing the well-being of others, often at her own expense. The thought of bringing a genuine, unadulterated joy into her life, of offering her a tangible symbol of the appreciation she so richly deserved, resonated deeply within me. This wasn't about retaliation, although a small, almost imperceptible part of me acknowledged the poetic justice of it all. This was about recognizing and rewarding the one person in my family who had consistently shown me unconditional love and acceptance. The decision felt right, a quiet affirmation of my own values. It wasn't about trying to hurt my mother, although I knew the outcome would likely cause her pain. It was about finally prioritizing kindness and generosity towards someone who had always extended those qualities to me. The more I considered it, the more a sense of quiet purpose settled within me. This wasn't a fleeting impulse, it was a deliberate act of recognizing and valuing genuine human connection. The process of turning this idea into reality was a carefully guarded secret. Aunt Carol lived several states away, our regular phone calls providing a convenient cover for my clandestine activities. I spent hours online, poring over the listing, studying the photographs, imagining Aunt Carol tending to the garden, basking in the sunlight of the sunroom. I contacted the realtor, a discreet professional who understood the need for confidentiality. The viewings were done virtually, long video tours that allowed me to immerse myself in the space without physically being there. Each virtual walkthrough solidified my conviction. This was the perfect place for her, a sanctuary filled with light and tranquility. The negotiations were conducted via email and phone, each carefully worded message designed to protect my anonymity. There was a strange sense of detachment as I navigated the complexities of the real estate transaction. knowing the ultimate recipient of this significant purchase would be utterly unaware until the very end. It felt like a grand, carefully orchestrated surprise, a secret I held close to my chest, fueling me with a quiet sense of anticipation. The inspections were arranged, the paperwork meticulously reviewed, each step bringing me closer to the moment of revelation. The day I finally drove out to Aunt Carol's house felt surreal. The landscape blurred past the car window as my thoughts raced, replaying the potential scenarios, the look on her face. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched the set of keys in my pocket, a tangible representation of the life-altering gift I was about to bestow. When I finally stood on her doorstep and she opened the door, her familiar warm smile instantly put me at ease. We settled into her cozy living room, the afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the worn but comfortable furniture. I savoured the normalcy of the moment, the quiet conversation, the shared cup of tea, knowing that everything was about to change. Finally, the moment arrived. I took a deep breath, reached into my bag, and handed her the keys. Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion as she looked from the keys to me. "What's this, Vivian?" she asked, her voice filled with gentle curiosity. "And then," I told her. "Aunt Carol," I began, my voice slightly thick with emotion, "this is for you. It's your new house. It's the little cottage you always admired, the one with the big garden." The transformation that washed over her face in that moment was something I will carry with me forever. The initial confusion melted away, replaced by a dawning realization, a slow comprehension of the enormity of the gesture. Her eyes widened in disbelief, tears welling up and then spilling down her cheeks. A soft gasp escaped her lips, followed by a whispered, "Vivian, you didn't." And then the dam finally broke. She launched herself out of her chair and into my arms, her embrace filled with a mixture of shock, overwhelming joy, and profound gratitude. "Thank you," she sobbed, her words muffled against my shoulder. "Thank you, my dear girl. I don't know what to say." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of her embrace and the raw emotion of her gratitude, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right decision. This was a joy that resonated deep within my soul, a reward far greater than any familial approval could ever offer. The news of Aunt Carol's new home inevitably reached my mother. The family grapevine, it seems, is a remarkably efficient, if not always accurate, source of information. The phone call I received a few days later was exactly as I had anticipated. A volatile eruption of disbelief, anger, and a heavy dose of expertly deployed guilt. Her voice, usually laced with a subtle undercurrent of martyrdom, was raw with outrage. How could I have done this? How could I have been so deliberately cruel, so pointedly dismissive of her own long-cherished dream? Why Aunt Carol and not her own mother? Didn't I love her? Hadn't she sacrificed everything for me? The familiar accusations and emotional manipulations rained down the phone line, each word a carefully aimed barb designed to pierce my newfound sense of resolve. I kept my response calm, measured, my voice a stark contrast to her escalating hysteria. I reiterated the years of feeling unappreciated, the constant criticism that had chipped away at my self-worth, the casual cruelty of Ava's words, and the family's dismissive laughter. I explained that my decision was not born out of malice, but out of a desire to offer a profound act of kindness to someone who had consistently shown me unconditional love and unwavering support. I spoke of Aunt Carol's quiet strength, her selfless nature, and the simple joy this gift had brought into her life. The conversation was difficult, emotionally draining, dredging up old hurts and resentments. There were accusations of betrayal, tearful pleas for reconsideration, and ultimately a strained, unresolved silence that hung heavy in the air when we finally disconnected. But this time something was different. I didn't crumble under the weight of her disapproval. The familiar pangs of guilt were fleeting, quickly replaced by a stronger sense of self-preservation and a quiet conviction that I had made the right choice. For the first time, I wasn't seeking her validation, wasn't trying to appease her or explain myself in a way that would finally earn her approval. My decision had been based on my own values, on recognizing and reciprocating genuine kindness, and that, I realized, was enough. Life after that phone call settled into a new rhythm. My relationship with my immediate family remained distant. There were occasional tentative attempts at contact, a strained birthday card from my father, a passive-aggressive email from Rachel, the occasional guilt-laden voicemail from my mother. I responded politely but kept my interactions brief, maintaining the boundaries I had so painstakingly established. I had come to understand that setting limits wasn't an act of aggression, but an essential form of self-care, a way to protect my emotional well-being from the familiar patterns of manipulation and negativity. Aunt Carol, meanwhile, was thriving in her new home. Her phone calls became a source of genuine joy, filled with descriptions of her flourishing garden, the friendly faces of her new neighbors, and the peaceful evenings she spent reading by the crackling fireplace. Seeing her happiness, hearing the lightness in her voice, provided a deep sense of validation, a quiet affirmation that my decision had brought tangible good into the world. It was a reward far more meaningful than any familial approval could ever have been. Looking back, I can see how my mother's cutting words that day, as deeply hurtful as they were, ultimately served as a catalyst for profound change in my life. They forced me to confront the deep-seated insecurities that had allowed me to tolerate years of emotional neglect. By choosing to redirect my resources and my affection towards someone who truly appreciated it, I not only brought immense joy to Aunt Carol's life, but also embarked on a long and challenging, but ultimately liberating journey of healing and self-discovery. The dream house became a powerful symbol, not of my mother's unfulfilled desires, but of my own burgeoning self-worth and the transformative power of choosing kindness and compassion over obligation and expectation. Sometimes in the quiet moments, I allow myself to wonder if my mother ever truly understood the lesson embedded in my unexpected act of generosity. Perhaps seeing her own dream realized by someone else, someone who had consistently shown her daughter the love and respect she often withheld, might have sparked a moment of reflection. But even if that understanding never comes, I know that I made the right choice. I finally chose myself, and in doing so, I was able to give a truly meaningful gift to someone who deserved it more than words can say. And in the end, that quiet knowledge, that inner peace, is all that truly matters.